So if we click the modifier tab, you have 4 different varieties here of modifiers. Modify side over here and the simulate side over here. These are things that are mostly controlled in other areas of Blender. Where you want to focus on is the generate and deform. These are your main workhorse, or workhorses rather, in Blender. The most common used, modifier in Blender is the subdivision surface modifier. So if I click on this cube and I go to add modifier, subdivision surface, you can see that it appears to have sort of morphed this cube into almost like a sphere. And what's happening there is the cube is being subdivided, but also a special math is being applied to it to smooth that subdivision out. And that is the catmull-clark math, I guess, being added to it. If we turn it to simple, you see the cube retains its shape, and the subdivisions views are 1, and the render is set to 2, which means that when you render it, it will render at 2 subdivisions. So you can't really see much of a difference that's being made when it's in simple mode. However, if we say we bump this up to 4, and then we click apply, and then we hit tab, you'll see now that this cube has been subdivided 4 by 4 times. So if I hit control, that's another thing. If you're trying to undo in Blender, it's important to note that you're only going to be able to undo when you are in the type of mode that you did stuff in. So I was in object mode when I applied these, so if I hit tab to go back to object mode, then I hit Control Z, and you can see it rewinding back to before I deleted this modifier. So if I change the amount of subdivisions to like just 2, and then I hit apply, then I hit tab, you'll see that it subdivided it much less. So go back into, hit tab to go back in object mode, I'll hit Control Z. And so if I go back to the catmull-clark, you can see much more of a visual effect of this subdivision surface modifier. And if you want your objects to look smooth and get rid of the pixelated PlayStation 1 looking faces here, you hit T to bring up your tool shelf and hit smooth on that object. So if we bump the subdivisions up to 4, we basically have almost a sphere here. So that brings me to the next modifier I want to talk about, the bevel modifier. And what the bevel does is you can also turn off the likewise how you can turn off the visibility of a whole object in the outliner in Blender, you can turn off the visibility of specific modifiers. So if I click this eye on this SubSurf modifier, we now are only seeing the effect of the bevel modifier. What the bevel does, and it's kind of hard to see, so I'm going to hit T and change the shading back to flat, which is why this is really an option, because sometimes you want to see exactly what the faces on your object are doing, and sometimes that can be a little hard with smooth shading. So I'll keep it on flat. What the bevel modifier is doing is splitting the edges. If I change the visibility off and on, it's splitting the edges of this cube, which gives it a more rounded bevel look. And we can control the width of this bevel right here. Another thing you can do with these modifiers is you can move the position of them. And I'll expand these so you can see a little better. I just threw the bevel one up under the subdivision surface modifier, and the order of these modifiers is very important in terms of the type of effect you'll get. So if I turn the eye back on the subdivision surface modifier, you'll see that with the bevel modifier under the SubSurf modifier, it helps this cube retain its shape, because the special math I was talking about on this subdivision surface modifier has more geometry to go off of with the bevel under here. Now if I hit T and turn the smoothing back on, we get this kind of nice looking smooth cube, which we can control the rigidness of its edges with this width here. And additionally, if we add more subdivision surface, we get a more refined looking object. However, if you'll notice up here, which lists your faces and verts in the scene, it's now jumped up to 24,000 faces. So if I turn off the visibility of the subdivision surface and turn off the visibility of the bevel modifier, we are back down to 6 faces, the 6 faces that this cube consists of. So the more subdivisions you do on your subdivision surface modifier, the more exponentially it's going to increase the amount of faces. Adding the bevel brings that up to 26, and then of course that turning on the subdivision surface modifier is like multiplying that by itself by 26 by 5 times. So you can kind of keep an eye on your resources and how much stuff you're using up here. So we'll drop that way down to like maybe 3. Sometimes you want to keep the subdivisions pretty low while you're working around in Blender, but when it comes to render time, you want it to render with that high amount of subdivisions. So you can leave this up at a high number, and it will only bog down your system when you're rendering it to get the final result there.